Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah. What? How about you?
Yeah, not too bad, man. Not too bad. Not too bad. In Christchurch today.
Oh, wow. Another event, I suppose. You look like you're in an
Yeah,
auditorium or something.
yeah. I'm at Tapai.
Oh, nice, nice, nice. Awesome.
Okay. Can you share your screen?
Yep, yep.
Just so we can do some testing. Obviously, we've got people coming in. Welcome. We're just getting ourselves set up here.
Go. Select window or screen.
Select
Yeah, that's fine.
screen.
Allow.
Screen.
There we go.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. So you are good to go.
That's working.
Now, down the bottom, you'll see you've got icons there for participants, so you can see who's here.
Yeah.
And you have chat. So,
Easy.
morning all. So, if you can, you can just watch this thread, jump into it from time to time if people have got
Yeah.
questions. It's a live room, so everyone, as you can see, everyone will be joining you, kind of like a Zoom call, if you like.
Yep. Yep.
So they will be actually unmute themselves and turn on their video and ask you questions and things like that. I set it up like this just so it's a little bit more interactive
Yep.
for you than a live stream, just
Yeah.
just broadcast. So that's good to go. We're recording. It'll be available
Perfect.
for everyone to be able to replay straight after the
Lovely.
event.
Lovely.
As well. Hopefully that is hopefully that's all
That should
good.
be it.
That's all good.
Yeah. Good.
Ah,
Awesome. I'll hang around. Once it hits the clock, I'll start. And once you have enough people join in, yeah.
yeah. No, it's really good. Appreciate you being able to share your knowledge with everyone today. So
Yeah,
really
it's
cool.
funny because OpenAI just came up with something similar and something of their own a couple of days ago. Not a couple, a few days ago.
Have
Few
you had
days
a
ago.
look at it?
Yeah, I did have a look at it, and I will give my spiel on it. But it was a weird
It's
coincidence. I'm like,
not. It's pretty underwhelming, man. It's
yes,
not. It's you can. I mean, the example they gave was in a document comparison workflow, which you can do in chat. You don't
really,
need an agent to
you
do
didn't need
that
it.
stuff, right?
No,
And you actually still have to have developer skills to be able to connect it up to publish that application and do anything with it. So
yeah,
it's it's very much a half-baked solution.
yeah. I think they wanted to get
I mean,
ahead
it's
of the curve. They just wanted to dump something out there so that they know that hey, we are in this space and we'll be getting better.
I mean,
Something like
people will start, building things and all that kind of stuff, I guess. But it's still, yeah, I was pretty underwhelmed by what
absolutely,
they
absolutely.
put out. I think what's really cool is how they showcased how you can work with Canva inside ChatGPT or work with those tools
Booking.com
inside the
and
product, right?
Canva and Figma.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so you've kind of got, OpenAI is becoming this operating system for, um, you know, a new web, if you like. Like it's a
yeah,
whole
yeah,
new operating system for getting stuff done. And if
absolutely.
you don't have to install anything, like this whole idea of having apps installed on
Apps.
your laptop, or it's like
Yeah, sure.
it's you just forward slash type in what you want, and it's going to be able to start working with it, right? It's like
That, yeah,
it's a
I
really
think
new way of new approach.
absolutely. I think we are already getting rid of search. Um, my Recent searches have just gone down. I sit with Perplexity, and that's how I search nowadays. Few advertisements, more accurate results. So
And
that's
yet,
gone.
it's interesting how the share of search for Google has dropped a tiny amount, right?
Yeah,
And it's not that these AI tools are actually suffocating the search volume from the likes of Google. It's just that it's like they've grown the entire pie. It's like
yeah,
there's just the volume of searches and the volume of queries coming through is
yeah,
just vastly, exponentially more than what they used to be.
yeah.
And of
And
course,
now they're just
OpenAI is using Google search. Copilot, of course, is using Bing.
yeah,
Um, so it's that's going to be interesting. Anyway,
that'll be
we
this.
uh, it's uh, uh, it's certainly changing very very quickly. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely.
uh,
Well,
I'm
waiting to
getting
see
I'm
what's
getting
happening
booked
there
to
now.
I'm getting booked to speak at events in April and March and April next year. And I'm like,
Well,
I can't even think about what AI is going to be like in March.
yeah, with this kind of speed, who knows what we are going to get by then? Yeah, but I think
So
that's the good part. We are at the cusp of something that's changing in front of our eyes, and honestly, we are
oh,
part of it. I couldn't be more excited. I definitely missed the dot com bubble, or what was supposed to be Web3, which really crashed. So yeah, let's go along with the ride for this one.
yeah. All right. So good morning, almost good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you here. I am going to bounce out and hand you over to um, Pranav, who's going to run you through this session. And I look forward to, like many will watch it on demand as well a bit later on. But we've got two things, another session starting at 12:30, and I'm speaking at Tapai at 2 o'clock. So um, it's in your court. I know that you've got some incredible use cases and tools to showcase today. So thank you very much for lending your time to share your expertise with people. And I shall bounce out and hand over. So well done, and thanks everyone
Thank you so
for
much, Justin. Thank you for having
tuning
me. Yeah, I'll just give everybody a minute or two just to join, and then we can kick this off. Just giving people a little more time, and we shall kick off in another minute. All right, we are 2 minutes past, so I think people will trickle in. Maybe everybody's just grabbing their lunch as we get along with this. So before any further ado, I'll just quickly start and introduce myself. My name is Pranav. I'm the lead business and AI analyst for Optimation New Zealand. Optimation New Zealand is a small IT service company, and I genuinely believe we truly punch above our weight and actually above our size. What Automation does as an IT service company is we build solutions and custom products for our customers. Now, uh, in here, we have multiple products and multiple solutions that we give. But today we are specifically going to discuss about Connect, which is a proprietary product that we have built for government and community corrections to help them monitor and manage supervised individuals. Not a very sexy industry to be in, but definitely very interesting. Now, Connect is also one of the leading products that is in this space and is used right now by New Zealand and Australian companies. So a little hula about ourselves. Yes, the Connect product did win, was the winner of the NZ High Tech Awards this year. So yay us, but we are extremely, extremely proud of this. We were the finalists last year as well, but this year we definitely took it up a notch to win the actual award. All right, that's about automation. Now, getting into what is Connect, and within Connect, we have multiple solutions. So, the solution that we are going to discuss is specifically called Connect for Parole Boards. Now, why is that, and what is parole board? I'll give you a quick description. The reason I explain this is because this will give you a quick idea of what is the complexity around the product we have and why did we rely on a solution that I built to actually come up with something like this. So just to give you an idea, how does the Connect product work in terms of the parole board background? So what parole board does is basically they have at the heart of it we have a secretariat portal. Now the secretariat portal is the one wherein all the officers would log in to manage the applications or what we call as matters. So these matters would be managed from start till the end. So basically an application would be an SI or an offender applying for say parole. They want to apply for parole and they want to get out in the community. So when they do that, this application flows through here. Now, this does have tons of integration and tons of specific solutions that we have added in here. Most importantly, what we have is an entire scheduling system wherein the officers are able to create meetings and especially board meetings. Now, what is a board meeting is basically where board members will come together and discuss officially what is the status of the application that the offender has made and whether or not they'll proceed with the application or they'll decline the request. Now, the reason this is very important and not just another meeting is because everything needs to be captured, audited, and stored right from the meeting type to the board members to the actual decisions that were made in that lengthy minutes that were captured within that meeting. So, this scheduling and capturing meeting is quite important. Along with that, we also have an entire document management system because, as you can imagine, if there is an offender applying for parole, there are tens, if not hundreds, of documents that are submitted right from the prison facilities to the hospital to the parole officers to everybody in there. So we need a thorough and a robust document management system to be added to this. Now, along with this, we also have something called a board member portal because I did mention board meetings there. Now, board member portal, as the name suggests, is specifically for board members. It is not built for officers. And the way we differentiate it is because board members do not need to know the nitty gritties of how an application flows through the system. However, they want to know is all the documents, all the information that they want to see as part of the application before they can make a decision. So before board members go to a board meeting, they'll go through all the documents that are submitted, and this is the portal that they do that in. They'll take notes, they'll make annotations, they'll share notes amongst each other, there'll be comments saying, I think this is this or this should be done this way. And all those are official documents that need to be captured. And this information then also is linked with your SMS gateway to send notifications, along with Outlook, wherein we are able to create meetings directly into the board members' calendars so that they know that they have upcoming meetings or board meetings to go to. Now, Just a quick recap, you have the Secretariat portal with documents, notations, meetings, and then you have a board portal, which is linked to this. Now, if you follow me through for 2 minutes, you have one offender. So an offender, a single offender can have multiple applications or multiple matters. Now, one matter is assigned to an officer at any given point of time, but every matter has one or more actions. Actions are something like tasks that the officer need to do. These are mandatory actions that are created. Uh, Sorry, can somebody go on mute? Perfect. Thank you. I have no clue what I'm looking at. So if you have questions, just unmute yourself and ask me. Stop me. I'm happy to take any questions. So don't wait for a pause, or else I will look at the chat later and answer all your queries. So continuing with this one is one offender, multiple matters, one matter, multiple actions, and multiple tasks. The reason I explain this is because this will be another added complexity to what we are trying to do, or the problem that our clients had with this one. Now, this also flows to the board member portal. So again, you have multiple board members attached to a single meeting, which is then attached to multiple matters. So it's an absolute web of complexities in terms of how the information flows from one table or one channel to another. So this is a quick journey on what is Connect for Parole Boards and what we do with it. Now, moving forward, well, if you remember who this guy is, I think you're as old as I am. So I absolutely love the movie, by the way, Die Hard fan. Anyway, so what we are seeing all over LinkedIn, and you can blame me for that. I'll definitely take the blame for it. Is agents everywhere. I think 2 years ago it was AI everywhere. It's still there, but anybody who's following agents closely, AI closely, you will realize that everybody is talking about agentic agentic rag, agentic flows, and even this presentation is about agents. So, well, I am part of the problem, I suppose. Anyway, we want to learn more about agents. So, what are agents and why have they gained so much popularity? So, I'll quickly explain how how AI has progressed. And when first we got introduced to LLMs was ChatGPT. I don't know if anybody remembers or knows what's the full form for GPT. It's a generative pre-trained transformer. Yeah, quite a mouthful. That's what happens when you let nerds decide the name of something that important. So they literally took chatting with a generative pre-trained transformer, Chat GPT, and the name stuck. So here we go. Anyway, so previously we had LLMs, which was simple. You ask LLM a question, it'll give you an answer. That was it. The first initial versions of ChatGPT did exactly that. But then we took one step further and brought in RAG. RAG is retrieval augmented generation. So anybody who's not aware of what RAG is, it is literally asking the LLM to first look at the context or a set of documents before it can go and generate an answer itself. So if we point it to a document store and it'll fetch that answer, give you the answer. That was the second wave of LLM progression. Now, third is where we are at agent. The best part about agents is it is not just RAG and LLM, but it also has memory. That's why I've highlighted it here is it uses memory because it now has a reasoning loop to go around. It will not just say, give me this and it'll answer it. Nowadays, the agents give us the capability to actually verify stuff, go back, change, modify, and then give you an answer and then perform an action. Also, agents use something called tools. Now that is quite important because tools is what gives agent the capability to do something that the LLM cannot. Now, before I go ahead and explain what it is about Flowise or what software I'm using, I'll quickly stop sharing and jump into another quick demo that I wanted to do. Um, so here we go. Every time I'm trying to share, it's just asking me multiple questions. So just bear with me. Perfect. All right. Now, this is Flowise. I'll explain exactly what Flowise is. So don't worry about that. What I want to show here is how and the way agents work and why agents are useful. So I'll do a very short and very quick demo. If you have questions, put it in the chat and I'll explain what we have done here. So I just click on add new this is a new agent flow here. I'll click, say agent, boom, pretty simple. Join this. To be honest, if you don't join it, nothing happens. It's just a visual flow. Now in here, I'm going to go and check OpenAI. The reason I do that is because I have credentials for OpenAI and I have actually paid them money. So might as well use their service. Now, in here, I'll just save it. I've not done anything. I'll just click here as a save and say, yep, test, because this is the test flow. Now, what I want to check here is I'll ask this agent or this LLM, because there's nothing in here right now, so it might as well be an LLM, is what is the current date and time? So the moment I ask it this question, ideally it should come up with an answer. Here we go. So if I expand this, it will tell you that I am not able to provide real-time information. Pretty straightforward because the LLM was trained on a static data, which was quite old, and it is asking you to bugger off and go on a search engine. That's not the answer we expected. So what we are going to do here is now give it tools. That's what I described here previously. So we click on tools, we go here and we will add a custom tool that I've created. Again, I'll explain this, what is a custom tool in detail. So I've said date and time, I click here, click save, and I go ahead and ask the same question again to see what it does this time. So hopefully it answers correctly. Otherwise, there we go. All right, perfect. It is exactly the correct date and correct time. So you see how the answer has changed just by adding a simple tool. So LLMs by themselves don't have context. Agents give you context when they work along with tools. Now, if I go here and say, what's the weather? Oh, that's a bad spelling. In Auckland. So ideally, I should expect that they'll have some answer, but as you can expect, no, it doesn't know what's the weather in Auckland because the LLM has no way to check what's the current date time or what's the location or what's the actual weather. It needs to connect to the internet to do that. Now, to give it this functionality, we'll add another tool so that this LLM now becomes smart enough to answer your queries. So what I've done is I've added this custom tool called Google Search. Pretty plain and simple. Google Search is free, so you don't need to pay them anything to create the API and share it here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it the same question again. So hopefully this will answer with the correct information. The weather is pretty shit right now, nothing to be honest. But here we go. Perfect. So now it is answering your questions based on the current weather, the current situation. And if you see, it does show this tool icon telling us that it actually used one of the tools it had access to retrieve this information for us. So that's how LLMs or other agents work alongside tools to give us more accurate information. And this was just one of the examples of doing that. Now, I'll quickly stop sharing and jump back into my presentation. Here we go. Right, now that we have finished the demo, I'll move along. Now, the option that you saw earlier was called Flowise, but you have other options available. Again, I am not a spokesperson for Flowise. I unfortunately don't get paid by them. I should be asking for it though. But anyway, so the options available to me a few months ago, and that is 6 months ago, were Flowise, LangFlow, and Any10. All three roughly do the same thing. However, LangChain, the word not mentioned here, is the basis for all three of them. So that forms the heart of it. Now, when I started my AI journey ages ago, and in AI we speak pre and post Chat GPT, I was learning Python, I was learning machine learning, found it super exciting. But when I started working back into my day job, I didn't have time to do that. So what I realized is how say these softwares would help you build something without having to go into the code in depth and quickly prototype something. So again, you can use any of these three. You don't have to stick with Flowise AI at all. And once you use one of these things, you will get a good hang of all three of them, including the new flow introduced by OpenAI. I believe they're quite late to the party, but they will get there because pure amount of money that they have. But right now, if you try to use the open AI version of it, I think there are only 12 or 13 nodes available, which restricts it quite much. But going forward, I'm sure it is going to catch up and it is going to grow immensely. But for now, you're safe here for at least, I can say, 3 months, 6 months at least, before it explodes in the scene. Now, I'll jump on Flowise because that's the one that I used, and one of the only reasons I used it because when I did my research, it said that it is the best one to go actually into production for production deployment and monitoring. So that's one of the main reasons I chose. What Flowise does is help you build visual workflows, rapidly helping you prototyping. So if you're somebody like me or somebody like a product manager, a business analyst, or even a project manager who wants to test something and prototype something, LangChain or LangFlow, N8N, Flowise, these are your go-to tools and they're super easy to use. Now, what was the context that we use Flowise in and why it had potential? It helped me build agents with low and no code. What I did 5 minutes ago is although a very basic, but still a valid example of building an agent. It was less than a minute, and you could build your own agent and ask it to do things. Now, you can put anything in there. You can ask it to retrieve Google News for you. You can ask it to retrieve documents for you. It all depends on the integration that you build. So that's not something that's super complicated because you don't have to sit and write Python code, which I loved, but I'd rather not do. Um, and another big advantage here with Flowise is that you can build things quickly. Now, I focus on quickly because if you start writing code, it takes ages to understand lines and lines of code. And if you are not a developer, I'm not a developer, I got stuck in it. So I thought this was a much easier to actually build something. And like I said, this is for non-technical people. If you're technical and interested in building this and you want to get knee deep into the works, I'd suggest go for LangChain. That gives you a code level access to building these things, and you'll be able to modify things a little more. But if you don't want to do that, if you want to prototype something quickly, just go with Flowise, LangFlow, or N8N, or the new OpenAI one. Now, this is the existing data construct. I'm sure you can't see anything here, so I'll probably try and show you a bit of it by zooming in. So as you can see, this is super complex data. This is an actual SQL database table and how multiple tables are related in the connect for parole boards. You have about 30 odd tables interconnected with each other where data is flowing from one to the other, back to the other, stuff like that. So the reason I'm showing this is to explain you the complexity of how this all of this information is correlated to is related to each other. Now, if you want to retrieve this information, you gotta write SQL queries, and I love SQL queries. Said no one ever. At least I don't know anybody who seriously loves those. If you do, then you can probably skip this because yeah, half of it is SQL queries to be honest. But if you're somebody who does not want to write SQL queries, this is one of the best solutions for you. And the reason we came to this solution is first trying to identify what is the problem that we're trying to solve. So the problem that we were trying to solve here was for our customers, wherein they're saying they need to get quickly data on custom reports on their specific role and responsibility. So yes, we have reporting function. Yes, we have Power BI. But what they were looking for is each officer within the portal has a specific role and responsibility, and they wanted records and reports to be generated specifically for them. And obviously, they none of them were technical enough to write SQL queries. The other reason was board members needed to see information on specific matters. Currently, the way they can do that is going by into each matter one at a time, trying to go through the notes, saying who has replied on this, who has commented on this, and try to understand, which was quite complex. And they also wanted the capability that whenever any new officer joins, they don't want to spend an entire week trying to explain the new officer how the system works. They just wanted to ideally point them to a 150-page document and say, go through it, which they never will. So what we did was we also wanted to bring in a solution that would automatically answer queries for for the new officers about how the connect for parole board works. They could ask any question about the system and we should be able to answer that. what solution did we propose? We proposed a chatbot, obviously, which can retrieve information from multiple SQL tables that you just saw, a complex web of tables and information now, and get that along. Now, also, they wanted to retrieve information in various formats. They said, hey, yes, um, we made every effort possible to try and make them move away from Excel, but that we couldn't. We are trying, to be honest. But they said, can I just download the information and work on it myself so that I don't have to log into the system again? So that was one of the requests. And the third one was by board members who are quite senior executives. And it was, if I wanted them to ask to write SQL queries, it would be like asking my mom to use an iPhone, which will be impossible. So we didn't go there. So what they were saying is, can we quickly view some comments and annotations that other officers have put so that we can help come to a conclusion faster? Now, that is the solution we proposed to them. Now, how does it work? I will get into the nitty-gritties of how does the actual solution work. We wanted to use natural language queries. We wanted to give them information fast, and we also wanted to give them a step-by-step guide on how to use the system. So the way we did that was first identify for the chatbot when the user enters a query. We identify whether the query is based on the database, which is the SQL table. So if it is information about matters, appointments, meetings, actions, officers, anything that sort, we put it in this bucket. If it is a query that deals with how to use the system, how to use Connect for parole boards, then it's on this time. So once we have segregated those, the easier journey was to validate the query on the right side, which is RAG query. Validate the query, search for the details, go into your vector database, retrieve the information, and put it for the officer in a much more easier and readable form. That was the short journey. The long journey was, what if they are asking for a complex query where they want matters in a certain stage, at a certain state, assigned to a certain officer, and they just write what they want. They don't know anything that goes on in your backend in the SQL database. So what we were doing is, when they input a query like this, we use the powers of LLM, the gods of LLM, to convert that query into an actual SQL query, because that LLM will know what your schema looks like, will verify that query, we will run the query against an actual database and retrieve that information. We will also have another LLM to validate. That's the most important thing, is validate the answer that has been retrieved and then share that answer with the user. So the way we built it is, it was a tight loop of verifications and loop back if something goes wrong. So that's how we tried to build this entire chat agent, which we're trying to solve three problems. The problem one, for officers to get reports that are customized and to their requirement, to get board members the ability to go in and see comments, whatever other has put through, and then also be able the ability for new officers to see how the system works and ask as many questions about the system as possible so that they can start working on the Connect platform. Now, um, I did share a few instructions. I'll be surprised if anybody actually followed them. But if you did, this is what your screen should look like when you install Flowise and when you click the command npx flowise start. Now, once you've done that, it does take a few minutes for it to load. The best part is, because it's sitting on a local server, it does take time, but it's 100% private. You don't have to worry about anything. So if you're using the OpenAI solution that just was released on, I think, 7th of October, 6th of October, yeah, you don't have this option. All right, now let's jump into the actual flow that we have created. So again, I'll stop sharing for a moment while I get hold of the right screen, uh, which is somewhere here. I'm lost. Yeah, found it. Okay. Now this was the previous test agent that we built. I'll move away from this. Um, Now, this is what the latest version of Flowise looks like. And if you go to agent flows And if you do install this, just ensure that you have the new V2 version here, not the V1, because chat flows is what they used to do previously, and now they have moved away from chat flows to actual agent flows. Now, agent flows is what we created right now, so I'll explain what that is. Executions is pretty straightforward. It has a detailed log of every single query that you've run using Flowise. Assistants give you three, currently two assistants. You can create your own custom assistant or you can use OpenAI. But again, you'll need the API setup for that. Now, if there is one thing that you can take from this entire presentation, ignore what I said till now, even if you want to. If there's one thing I want you to take from this is this thing called marketplace. Now, what marketplace does is give you ready available templates to use. That's the best thing, what I suppose, because these templates are already built for you with specific use cases in mind. You can steal them, download them, customize them to your own use case, or you can pass it off as your own. I suggest you don't do that because you might not be able to answer the questions. But what I will suggest is download those, customize them to your own situation, to your own use case, and then use it because that reduces more than 80% of the effort of trying to see how to build these flows. So please, if you are here and if you're genuinely wondering how to use the system or to quickly prototype something to show to your bosses or to show your colleagues, use something from the marketplace or build something off of this. Next one is tools. As you can see, the NZ data, and this was a tool I created. Yes, I don't know how to code, but I still managed to do that thanks to perplexity. But it's fairly simple to create your own tools here so that you can use them, build them, and use them in your agent flows. Now, credentials, please keep your eyes closed. Don't worry. These are all the credentials that we are using are so stored here. Credentials are required when you want to use a service or a tool in your agent flow. Variables, if you want to create global variables, you can create that. API keys. Now, this is an API key for your Flowise system here. It is not the API key for your Google account or your OpenAI account, so be careful. And document stores in a whole thing in itself. Now, what document store does is it will not only upload and store your documents, we also connect an actual vector database to it. So I'll show you how it looks like. Don't give me preview of chunks. Abstract chunks. There we go. So as you can see, this is what a document store looks like, and you have to use an embedding model and you have to use an actual vector database. I highly recommend using those. Without that, your search will be not that good. So OpenAI embeddings is almost free to use. Pinecone is what I've used because I wanted to use a free database available, but you can use anything. I think you have an Azure option as well of a vector database, so feel free to use that. Now, jumping into the actual use case that we had. So I explained to you how we targeted each and every the three scenarios that we wanted to run. How did we segregate those scenarios into multiple, into a chain of events? And we had control nodes everywhere saying, if this, then do this, if that, then do that. Now, although this flow might look a little complicated and a little difficult to see, I will zoom in on it and explain each and every component that we have used, why we have used it, and how it helps. Basically, how it helps in building this flow going forward. I'll also connect it to the database or the document store that we just saw so that you realize why we need to do something in terms to get the correct answers and to get the correct responses from here. Now, in here, I'll quickly zoom in. So every time you click on an agent flow, you get a start node for free. I don't know why, but yeah, it's easy because you will need a start node. Now, what the start node basically does is if you're building a short journey, you don't need to do anything here. But as you can see here, our journey is a bit more complex, has flows checking back in and has loop control as well in case we have any issues. So that's why it's a good habit which I learned the hard way is to use the start node and define your flow state variable. So if you double click on this, you will see all these flow state variables defined. And as you can see, there is no value that I've added. These are just blank quotes in there. Now, I'll explain what this flow state variable is. Imagine these as variables whose value is either going to be assigned or whose value is going to change throughout the journey. Now, because we are using loopback and because we are using memory, it is important to have these variables defined at the start so that the journey, all through the journey, they either are updated or they are recalled or repurposed. So that is why it's important to look at these and define these variables. How did I come to know about these variables? I built something and it just didn't work. So I tried to say what are these variables, and then I realized, okay, and there is an explanation for this. So just dig into it, and you'll be able to find the reason to why something is happening. Now, in here, after the start module, I said, okay, we need to classify our query. Now, what I've done is I'm using an agent. As you can see, if it shows this, clearly it is an agent. Then it will also show what LLM model you're using. If anybody has queries on this wherein, hey, but you don't want to use OpenAI because it's not secure or not safe or privacy concerns, yes, you can use your own local models. The reason I'm not showcasing it right now is I tried that and sometimes it gets really slow because my laptop clearly isn't that powerful. So you can have local agents here. All you have to do is if you are using something like Olama to have local agents installed on your system, just go here, click on go here, click on an agent, chat Olama, and just approve your add your credentials there. As simple as that. So if you have a local agent sitting on a laptop, you can call that. You don't need to use ChatGPT or OpenAI at all. Now, however, I am using that and I'm using the default parameters for OpenAI. Now, what I've done here is messages. This is very important because I want, how do I explain it to this agent or this LLM what needs to be done? Basically, I need to tell that, hey, the user is going to type something. You then need to understand what has been written and specifically categorize it into two parts and two parts only. Either it's a database query or it's an RAG query. Now I'm trying to keep this simple, but ideally there will be three options. If you ask it what's the weather today, it still should be able to answer, but it then needs to route it in a third direction. But I've tried to keep it simple, otherwise that flow was ballooning out of proportion. So in the messages, what I've done is I've given it a role as a system because that needs to be strict. The reason I've used system and not a user or a developer is I want it to be strict in the output that it generates. But most importantly, what I have asked it, I've given it this nice content or a context around what it needs to do. And I've given it 4 or 5 examples so that it understands what the query is and how to route that query, not route that, how to classify that query into the proper category. So this is, you can describe as much as possible unless you want to try the limitations for it, which I have not, but I have done quite a lot of information in here going forward. Um, I'm not using any tools right now. So if somebody has a question, why are we using an agent instead of an agent instead of an LLM? Well, there is no reason other than I thought that this would be quite more complex. So I started with an agent and I stuck with it. It made no difference to me. However, what is important is this return value as an assistant message and update Flowise state. Remember, we talked about the Flowise state here. These are the flow state. These are the variables that we need to update. So in here, what's going to happen is your flow state variable is going to be updated. The query type is going to be output and query question is user question. What this means is, I'll quickly explain that the query type flow state variable will now be assigned the output of this agent or of this LLM. That's how the flow state variable gets assigned a unique value which it can carry forward. That is when we need variables. If you have a simple flow, you don't need to use it. But if you have a complex flow where you have to reference that variable again and again, this is how it works. So what I've done is gone at the bottom here, update the flow state variable, and it just type into curly brackets and it will give you all the options available. You can type your own variable here, but I'll suggest stick with what you see. So for example, if I remove this and say output, it might actually work. But if you don't want to risk it, I'll say just give these two curly brackets. And as you see, you have multiple options coming in here, which you can use. I'll just show output here. And I've given an option saying here, what has happened as part of this classification agent that we have used. So Step one, the user asks a question. Step two is node two, where it will digest that question and classify that query, whether it is a database query or an SQL query. Now, based on the response from this agent, we have created a routing node. A routing node, what it does is, as the name suggests, it will take the input from the previous agent or the previous node. As you can see, agent flow 0. This is your agent flow 0. And then verify if the output of this node, because this node will only give you two outputs, database query or RAG query. And it will match the value and route the call to the next flow based on the output of this first node. So this node actually does nothing but just verify what the value is being thrown to it and which direction or which path it should follow. Now, in here, the next one, we'll go through the complex journey first. Now, the next one is the SQL database retrieval flow. Now, I'm looking at the end-to-end SQL flow or the retrieval flow that we have here. Now, in here, if I look at, I'll quickly scroll up a bit so you can see the details there, but this will give you in this, I have mentioned the entire SQL database schema. I have explained exactly what in the format that it understands so that your models can refer to this as the SQL schema. So if you see the variable here, which we defined at the first, is basically what has been updated as the SQL schema here. This is one of the most important step here because one, your entire query generation will be based on the schema here and the various tables that you have, but it also depends on what amount of access or role-based access that you want to give to the agent going forward. So you don't have people who don't have access trying to ask queries that they should not. Right now, I've kept it quite simple, but this is where your access control will come into picture. So that's that. The next node is obviously what we have updated here is the SQL schema. As you can see, the flow state variable. Now we jump into the SQL query generation. This is where I went full on in terms of the instructions that I've given to the OpenAI model. If you full screen this. I've given it a set of rules on what it should and should not do. Obviously, I don't want it to update, delete, or modify any of my tables at any point of time. However, I did explain it to much detail what my SQL schema and my tables look like, which I thought was really good. I thought, well, perfect, this is how it should be. Then I realized that if I just put the output of the previous schema retrieval one here, it automatically understands what that is. But extra context doesn't will not harm you in any possible way. So I let it be. I did not just work off of this. I wanted it to know that each and every column within each and every table means something. So that's why I gave that reference there. Now, in here, what we have done is the flow state user question. Remember, we have identified the question as part of the first part, and this is what it will pull as the question user's question now. And going forward, it will keep referring to that because this is the part where it is going to generate, transform that user question into an actual SQL query. So that's how it's going to work. This is again purely LLM based, and the heart of it is the OpenAI. I think GPT 4.1 is what I'm using, and you need a good, robust agent here. So if you have downloaded a local agent, something like Llama 3.18 billion, I've tried that. It was a bit of a hit and miss. So be careful. Maybe you can try a GPT OSS version. I thought that was much better, much quicker as well. But my machine could barely take the load. So if you have a really powerful machine with a GPU, I suggest you can run this locally. There's nothing stopping you from that. So, but you need a good model which will be able to translate the user query, understand the database schema, and translate that user query into an actual SQL query. That is what's happening here. And we have now gone ahead and updated the flow state for the variable SQL query to the output of this agent so that cloud knows this is the query that we need to rely on. The next node is just a validation node where it'll see, hey, it'll take the input from the previous node, validate if the query is correct or not. If it is correct, it'll move forward. If it is not, it'll modify and then send it to this node here to verify and validate whether the query that we has generated is valid or not. That's why you use ideally two different LLMs. So if you're using GPT right now, you can probably use a Mistral going forward so that you can say, hey, let me verify whether the query generated by the GPT 4.1 is actually usable or is actually useful or not. So that's how it moves forward. And see how we have put multiple validations all throughout this journey. It is very, very important to ensure that we have validations because sometimes these LLMs and agents will hallucinate, and you don't want rubbish answers to be given to your clients or to your customers or to your users. What I've noticed is when it comes to AI, if they see even one wrong answer, it just puts them off saying, we can't trust this technology. So that's why I have gone ahead and put multiple validations on all of these journeys so that we ensure that the answers that it gives is not is basically correct, or it says sorry, I don't know. It has to say that it should not hallucinate and give you answers which are invalid or definitely answers that are incorrect. Now we jump into the SQL query execution. So like I said, we again share those details of our SQL schema here. This is similar, but not the same as the previous node, wherein the previous node was for understanding the schema of our database. This is for actually taking that query and running with it. Now, once we run this, the query generated by this, if you see here, it will say flow state SQL query. So this is the input variable for this node, and it will take that query, run it against the schema that we have here, and try and come up with a response to that schema. So it will go, hey, yep, this is the query I want to run against this. Now, once you have run that query, it will be checked again whether it makes sense or not. If it doesn't make sense, we will send it to SQL correction. And what this does is it will verify and say, hey, this is not working. Let me generate a new query for you. If you see here, I have given multiple inputs to it. So if it's the query is correct, then this is the query that we're going to use. If it's an error, we will be updating this with that error, saying this is the error that needs to be pushed to the next node to let it know that, hey, something is not right and you need to run this again. Now, I don't know if you got this, but I have enabled memory here. This is one of the rare scenarios where we have something called enable memory because this is a correction node. It needs to remember how many loops have we run for now and how many times you have tried to correct the query if it was giving wrong answers continuously. Because as you can see, the next node is just a loop. You can define how many loops loop you want it to do before it gives up or says, sorry, I can't do it, or it's an invalid query. I've kept it at 3, but yeah, you can increase it to anything you want. But this is where it will keep checking in case it doesn't get the right answer. And eventually it will say, sorry, I don't know, or it says, sorry, this SQL query is not valid. So that is one of the rare scenarios we actually use memory. The reason I advise against using memory is a lot of bloat. If you're using it locally, it will start saving all your queries and using more tokens. Well, unless you have a lot of money, it will literally use more tokens and use up your OpenAI credits very fast. So I'll say, except for this node, try and avoid enabling memory for anything unless you have a very, very good valid reason for it. But if you do, be prepared because that will cost you a little bit. Sorry. Now, that was loop control. Going forward, now assuming that you have a proper response and your query generation not only was correct, but your query execution was also correct. Now, what it at the second last step happens is it will take the response generated by that agent and it will say, hey, this is the response generated. Now put it in a format that everybody can understand because we don't want board members or we don't want officers to look at another SQL response. So what we want to ensure is whatever response we get from the after executing the SQL database query, we show it in a way that is understandable by the end user. Again, I have enabled memory here because we wanted to remember what it has showed. Second, we also want to remember the previous queries that it has run. If we do not enable memory and they ask a question, they're like, oh, let me check what I asked 5 or 10 minutes ago, that query is gone. But again, the more you enable memory, please remember, the more bloat you add to your system. That means it is going to take more memory, it is going to take use more tokens, and it is going to be sluggish. I have been a victim of this till I realized this was the issue. So you don't have to make all your mistakes. Anyway, the last output or the last flow state that we update is the final response because we want to capture this. And as this was the final response for the query that you or the customer asked, so that this is what gets updated as the final output, which goes to this node, which is the database response node. This does nothing but take the input from the previous node and show it to the officer, show it to the user, and it will take the response from the previous node. One of the mistakes that I've done was I had the same database response for both, and it lost track. So that's why I've created two different database responses node. So that sorry, two nodes for this one, so that it can identify uniquely what the response is. Now, the last part or the second part of this journey was RAG. Now, if you're somebody like me who's interested in retrieval augmented generation, it excited me because my assumption was that we can now get the LLM pointed to a right direction and ask it to learn from our own data. It doesn't need to use its own knowledge. Also, it doesn't need to go somewhere else to retrieve this. So I was always fascinated by how RAG works and why RAG works, basically. So we are using a document retrieval node. What it does is we will guide it to the document store. I'll show you again what we have done in document store. Now, a quick recap of how document store works. It's quite simple. All you have to do is upload that document. Now, remember, this entire thing is sitting on your local. So even if you have sensitive documents here for now, it's not going anywhere. It's on your local. However, that's where the good part stops. The problem with this is if you ask a LLM to look at an entire document, it will hallucinate because it does something called chunking. It'll chunk the documents into smaller parts and it only gets a reference for that window. So what we do is we take the document, we chunk it, and then we send it to a vector database. The moment we vectorize this information, it becomes very easy. Imagine it like numbers. All your chunks are contextualized and there are semantics added to it and I've made it into numbers so that the LLM can quickly pick and choose what numbers to use, mix them together and throw an option. So this is the format. This is the reason why we are using a document store, and I highly recommend vectorize your data. Do not just dump documents in here; it won't work. So this is what the agent does is this is what the node does. It'll look into the document store and pull the information based on that. Now, once that information is there, your LLM model will pull that information. If I don't know if you notice here, but in here I have said text with metadata. What that means is I just don't want it to pull up text. I want it to pull up references to why or where it got that data from. So that it is important for us to know once we see that answer, this is where it's coming from and it is not hallucinating. That is most important. Or as a worst case scenario, if you want to go in depth into the document, well, you can. You now have a reference to it. Now, the second last node in this journey is the response generation. This is an LLM. Again, I've used an agent, but it will pick up from the previous retrieval node. It will use that as an input. It will also use the user question as an input and then throw you and collate it and generate the final response. And the final response will then be given to the last node, which is the RAG response. And this will show the display the result of your query. Now, this was the explanation. I'm sorry it took us so long. I'll quickly demo an actual use case of how this information is pulled. Quickly open my text here because I don't want to write all the questions by myself. Now, what we are going to do is open our agent here. Uh, I will zoom out a little bit because I wanted you to see how the flow works end to end. So here it is. And what we're going to do is start with a simple question as in, what are the total number of matters or applications in the system or in our database? So if you see here, if I zoom in, it is giving you these green ticks. What that means, each tick tells you that one, what is the path that was taken by this flow, and if the output for that node was a success or not. So if that query was bad, it has actually gone here and shown you that, hey, this was triggered because, well, your SQL query was incorrect. Now, it has come up with a good answer saying there are about 5,800 records in our system. This is quite simple as a query. So let's take it up a notch a little bit. So I'm now going to ask, I've created these fictional officers, and now I'm asking to create a table of all the open matters. And I say open, I'm depending on the LLMs and the agent flow to understand what I mean by that. But I want all the open matters, which are currently basically not closed, assigned to this specific officer. I have created a synthetic database of all the users and officers, and that will generate your query. So if we look here, it will give you a table. Now the problem what I see here is, it has given me some random headers and why only five. So here we go. There are more than 500 records. So this is just a sample data. The agent flow is smart enough to tell you that, hey, this is just a small example of what you've asked for. If you want a full list, just type your question and I am more than happy to share you the full list. So what I'm going to do as part of the next query is take it up a notch further. What we're going to do is we're going to say create a table of all the matters. So let's type here to a different assigned to a different officer. But now this time we want matter type as RP. You don't need to know what RP means. It's just one of the matter types. Show the matter number, the matter type, and the IOMS number. The IOMS number is basically a unique identifying number for an offender. So once I ask this, now what it's going to have to do is it will have to retrieve data from multiple tables. It will have to retrieve data from the offender table because that will have the IOMS number, and then it will have to retrieve data from the matters table because, well, it will have the matter information in there. Now we only asked it for three fields and it has given us just three fields. So we said matter number, matter type, and IOMS number. Bam, that's it. Now I asked it to create a table. Well, it did create a table for me, but I can clearly see this is not usable unless I just go this and copy paste. So, well, that doesn't work very well, does it? Now, to make it slightly more complicated and more useful, what we're going to ask it this time is instead of a table, generate a CSV type response for me. Now, let me warn you, I have not integrated another Python code here, which will actually generate graphics for you. It will generate visuals for you. I have not created it. You can, or you can just use one of the existing tools to create that. I have only relied on the existing core functionality. But what the next query we are asking for is that for the same officer, now one, I want a CSV and I want more tables. I just don't want these three tables here, but I want a CSV to be generated. Now, as you can see, it has responded back in a comma separated value. This was one of the main, literally, believe it or not, was a main requirement from our clients because they wanted a CSV. They wanted to open this information in a CSV or a spreadsheet and then work on it. Yeah, I could not understand it, but I'll show you how it works. So we go into a blank uh, spreadsheet here and just paste it. Boom, that is it. That's all you have to do. And now you have a proper customized report that you wanted specifically for you. It will be very difficult to create these kind of reports, and the number of reports to be generated will be a lot. So that was how you can create a CSV as well, and how we can capture and show the details specifically from multiple tables. Now, second last query I'm going to run is regarding board members. So if I'm a board member and I want to see what other board member has written for any of the matters. I want to read what comments they have put for any of these matters. I will now want it to go into the board member table, pull that information across, go into the matters table, pull that information across, and show it this is taking more time than expected. Uh, okay, I will zoom it out a little bit. As you can see, this is still spinning and it when it's spinning, it tells you that it is trying to run the query. The reason it was spinning is it is now trying to link multiple databases together, create a query and pull that information for us. Those are the reason it usually takes a little bit of time, but let's expand this, and here we go. So now I have all the matters where this specific board member has commented. What I have also asked is an offense summary. So there is an offense detail. It's usually 3, 4, or 5 pages. What I've asked is to condense it into a summary so that the board member can look, hey, what has this offender done? Mind you, this is all fake data, so you don't have to worry about that. Thanks, Perplexity. Yes. But they don't have, they have a real concise offense summary so that they can understand why it is, and they can also then see what were the comments made by this. Now again, this is a table. It's not so good to look at, but I asked it for a table, so it gave me a table, and it will say, if you need this information in CSV or any other format, perfect, please let me know, so that it can, then we can just copy paste it and take it wherever we want. One last query, as you would have seen, is all our queries were based on the complex SQL database. Now, the last query that we are going to run is my favorite one, which is the RAG enabled journey. Now, what we're going to ask it is a very generic blank questions, how to assign actions to officers. Now, it needs to understand on this specific question itself that it is not an SQL database question. It is a document based question. So if I close this for a moment, you will see that now it has taken this journey instead of here. It was smart enough to understand that, hey, this is a question about how to use the system and not something about report generation or offenders. So what it did was it went into a document, it got the answer for you, and it also gave you where exactly to find where it has got the answer from. So this is where it looks into and gives you perfect context of where it got that information from to reduce any sort of hallucinations going forward. Now here I have a 150-page document. You can add multiple documents, but I'd like you to warn you, the more documents you add, the more complex the RAG system gets. This is just a prototype, so the answer was quick. But if you have 200, 300 odd documents attached here, it will take time to fetch that information for you. So yeah, that was our end-to-end journey on how we use Flowise and to create agent flow with multiple agents, loopbacks, and memory. So if you have any questions, just post it in the chat. If not, we can wrap it up on time, bang on time. And yeah, if you have queries, send it across, or you can send it with Jason as well. We are happy to take those. And yeah, let me know. So I'll wait for a minute or two. I think Tracy's typing something. I'll give Tracy a minute. Otherwise, we can call it a day. And thank you so much for attending. Anybody who wants to see this, this will be available again offline as well. So you can see it again if you want. Then I will choose which of these three tools to use. Tracy, I went with Flowise. I suggest go with LangFlow because LangFlow has even more integrations. But if you want to productionize something, I would still suggest go with Flowise because we are trying to put this flow in Azure and it is working for us. I might do something similar for Azure, but that is a little farther ahead. But if you want to use this, go ahead, use Flowise or LangFlow. I would have gone with LangFlow because that is the heart of everything. Perfect. Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions and have a good weekend. Sarat, if you're typing something, please go ahead. I'm still here. Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good evening.